everyone, it's Arlene's Deputat with Grace Notes. Today we're going to talk about what it means to be an end-of-life doula. Now that might be a term that you never even heard of, doula. Like, what's a doula? So first off, I'm going to suggest that the word doula, D-O-U-L-A, comes from the Greek, and it means women caring or serving another woman. And the truth is that in traditional society, women have always been the caregivers. They have been at the bedsides of the dying. They've been the ones that care for the sick, and they've been the ones that help bring new life in. And you know the term midwife as well as someone that attends the birth. And so doulas started to come into their own as birth doulas, I would say about the 60s or 70s, when women decided they wanted to take back the birth process from the medical establishment that said the father had to be in the waiting room and it was all secretive and it was something that happened to you and you had no part of it except being told to push and getting medication and then having your baby handed to you. Women and families decided they wanted to go back to that more personal experience, but in an environment that was safer. We know that infant mortality and maternal mortality in this country is very high, even in hospitals. But years and years ago, people gave birth at the farm. Sometimes people, the baby would make it, but the wife didn't. And so over the years, women learned how to care for one another. And then the birth doula movement started to again help women have a more natural childbirth, practice Lamaze, include the partner in the birthing process to make it a welcoming environment, a preparatory environment, so that when the new child was here, it was not all harsh lights and push and all those kinds of things, but a safe, welcoming environment to come into this world. Well, end-of-life doulas do much the same thing, only on the other side of it. And there's a lot of parallels between what happens when we're born and what happens when we die. The first one is, in its own natural state, it's nothing we can pinpoint exactly. If you're pregnant, you have a due date, you have a day you anticipate the baby coming, but if often babies come when they're ready to come. You all have heard of people who've had a child early or had a child later than anticipated. Now with medical science, we also can induce labor and then a child arrives on a schedule. Death is very similar. We can anticipate that someone might be ill and is dying, and we have approaching signs of imminent death. But nobody can exactly slate it, exactly when it's going to happen. But there's preparation we can do, and there's a condition we can put around the situation and the environment to calm everyone, make it a peaceful transition, a grace-filled transition, and have that spiritual essence of the person leave the body. Whatever you think that is, that last energetic, there's in the body, and then that last breath, and it no more is that person alive. And with changes in laws, people in many states can also now use medical aid in dying so that they too can schedule a death if they meet the right conditions. And another episode we'll talk about medical aid in dying. So what do doulas do? Well, doulas, end-of-life doulas, are there to help with the preparation, the execution of the vigil planning, those final days, and to help the family process and begin to deal with rituals and grief to help them assimilate what has just happened with the person that they loved. So let's talk about preparation. First off, we all know we're going to die, and none of us actually knows when the expiration date is. We tend to think about end-of-life planning when people are older, 60s, 70s, 80s. But I'm here to tell you that if you're over 18, you too should consider doing an advanced healthcare directive. That's one of the primary pieces of planning that doulas help people do. And what an advanced healthcare directive is you making decisions about how you would want to be treated with medical interventions and telling people in advance what those decisions are, so that should something happen and you could not verbally give those directions yourself, you have designated someone that you trust who is legally has the right to be your voice for the decisions that you want. We've just lived through, or still in, the COVID pandemic. And earlier, before we had vaccinations, many of us saw countless people on ventilators. That was what kept them alive. I told my husband that I did not want a ventilator, that if I got COVID, to allow natural death, because I know what a ventilator does. I know what the success rate is. And what you don't know is 80% of people that went on ventilators never came off and they died on them. That was not a death I would have wanted in the midst of COVID. So advanced healthcare directives have you decide, do you want a feeding tube? Would you want CPR if you had a heart attack? Would you want to have a ventilator? And you might, given what condition you have, what age you are, what your medical condition is. But these are questions that you start to contemplate, you put down in writing, and you talk to your family about, so that should the time come where you can't make a decision, your family is informed about what you want. So doulas help people manage that. We also help people figure out what else they would like as they think about their death. Do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to have a memorial service? Do you want to have a celebration of life? Do you want a traditional religious service? Do you want a hippie party? What is it that would make your end of life, your fact that you're not here anymore, meaningful to you, and help your loved ones left behind celebrate the person you were? So we start doing some of that work with people when they're perfectly healthy, because there's a lot to think about and there's a lot to consider. We also help people look at the legacy that they're leaving. What is it that you've done in your life? What are you proud of? And what do you want to leave behind for those that you love? And that can be anything from giving away items in advance to writing letters to people to be opened after you pass, just all kinds of innovative ways to embrace the fact that we're all eventually going to leave this physical form, this body. So doulas do a lot of preparation. We also do a thing called implementation. So at the point when a perfectly healthy person now becomes ill and is moving towards dying, usually in the last 48 to 72 hours of life, that's often when the vigil process starts. And a vigil is often when people are known to be non-responsive. They might be sleeping a lot. They're no longer eating. They're not communicating. They can hear, and you can create a really sacred environment, or whatever environment that person wants. I have a friend that when she's in her last dying days, what she wants is a chocolate fondue right next to her bedside, so that for other people coming to visit her, they get to have a chocolate treat, and she wants people to tell jokes on her bedside when she's dying, because for her it's not a sad occasion. She will be ready to leave the physical body, so she doesn't want people to be so sad about her passing. So it's customized to what you want. And what doulas do is we make sure to the best of our ability that we implement that plan that you have requested. And there's a lot of different iterations to what your plan can be. I personally want animals and my grandchildren around. I really don't want cell phones in my room in my last dying days. One cell phone maybe for an emergency, or if you want to FaceTime with me, if I'm able to do that. But I don't want a lot of phones. I'd like some quiet music, but I also like some show music. So again, you can customize it any way you want. And doulas help you be creative and implement your wishes at the time. And then lastly, the big thing that doulas help is with rituals and the grieving process. So we have rituals for the moment when someone takes their last breath. Something called blessing of the body is one ritual. There's many other things. Some families like to wash the body or prep the body. Some people don't want any part of that, and that's all fine too. We do help the families and the loved ones left behind process a little bit the experience they've just been through. And we make sure that we connect them to long-term grief support, usually with a hospice or a counselor in their community, because the grieving process is its own journey after the caregiving process has completed. So that's the range of what doulas can do before, during, and after your passing. If you wanted to find a doula, there's a number of ways to do it. There is a website called NEDA, N-E-D-A Alliance, and you can look state by state to find a doula in your community. Doulas often work as volunteers in hospice. They work as paid professionals. They work as part of a paid staff member on a hospice team, and they also are working with hospitals. There's a variety of trainings that doulas get. Lots of different places train doulas, so you can ask a prospective doula where they got their training and what their experience is. I just want you to be aware of the term end-of-life doula. It's an emerging profession. You're going to continue to hear more and more about doulas. They're going to be integrated into the dying process as we become more and more comfortable with death and dying, and we take that process back away from the highly medicalized death process we have now and make it more the transition, the natural transition that it really is in the flow of life and death. It's not that the medical profession isn't a good thing. Thank God for all that they do. But sometimes it's just time to say, allow me to die. I'm ready to go. And doulas can help you and your loved ones make that final decision so that you